So, deciphering goals. That's for me a really, really important topic. And but before we go there, it's some of the talks we had in the breakout rooms was about the history of Agile. Now I've been doing it for over 20 years. I came to Agile through extreme programming. I mean, I was by training a programmer. I studied computer science. I discovered extreme programming around 2000, Scrum 2001, something like that. And I have been doing it since then. And I really kind of drank the Kool-Aid in a positive way. And there's this saying from Mahatma Gandhi: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And these were really the phases I sensed that are going through. So now it's in the mainstream. I'm living in Bern, which is the capital, so there's lots of government, and I actually have engagements with the government here and there again. So they also start to embrace it, which is great. But on the other hand, somehow, it's not that funky niche thing anymore, where kind of you are being kind of regarded as weird or strange. But yeah, so things kind of progress and change over time. But the interesting thing for me is that they have so many things in between which came and disappeared, but Agile is still there. And if you think back, Scrum, pretty much in the form as we know it today, was shown to the public in 1995 at the UPSLA conference in Austin, Texas. So that's now 23 years ago. And it's still there, and it's still going strong. Maybe we are close to the plateau. That's what I thought a couple of years ago, but it's still not really there yet. So good things to come, I hope. Now, deciphering goals. Who of you thinks or believes you're doing Scrum? Maybe just bring up your hand or just say a mental yes, I'm doing Scrum. Okay, so just leave your hand up there if you have your camera on. Otherwise, nobody. Or if you can bring up the virtual hand. Leave your hand up if you had a sprint goal in your last sprint. Okay, some hands are disappearing. Now leave your hand up if your sprint goal was not a list of items out of the product backlog. Okay, a few more hands disappearing. A few hands are still up, and that's great, because that's really why goals are so important. And if you look into the Scrum guide, now, even a step backwards, one of the values of Scrum, there's this 4C or FROG acronym, which is easy to remember. So focus, respect, openness, courage, and commitment. Every time there's something mentioned in the Scrum guide about a commitment, it's towards a goal, never towards an amount of work. Because a goal, hopefully, if described well, describes an outcome and not an output. And far too often I see Scrum as being used as this output maximizer. More and more, bring up your velocity. Velocity, I like to think about it as a vanity metric. It feels really good. It could mean nothing. If you drive with a really high velocity in the wrong direction, you will not get to your destination either. So outcome matters. That's really what we are looking for. That's what we are striving for. And this is why I also really appreciate the latest version of the Scrum Guide, November 2020. It's now kind of over 2 years already. But they introduced the product goal, which was kind of really like a missing element in there. And that's also kind of one of the reasons why I thought about creating this webinar, this talk. So let me go ahead and let me share my screen or my Chrome browser. You should be seeing a Google Chrome here right now. So I'm not using PowerPoint.
Yes, we can see your mural.
Okay, good. So I'm using a mural, and I'll draw a little bit on there and talk as I doodle along. Here we go. So actually, one of the people in the breakout room basically had the book, The Professional Product Owner, which I wrote together with Don McGreal. We have it here. Which also has a polished translation. I never read it because I wouldn't understand it, but it was also translated into simplified Chinese, German, and South Korean or Korean. So it's kind of like interesting, and I have all those different versions at home as well. Okay, but without any further ado, now let's look into goals. And what we normally see in pretty much every organization is the following. Normally, or at least that's what you would expect, is that I did one change in the app, which I do not like. Let me just shift it a little bit. Here we go. Normally, you would expect that every organization has something along those lines of a company vision. Where do we see ourselves in a couple of years down the road? What do we think will be the new market trends? Where would we need to move, maybe on a product side, but maybe also on a technology infrastructure side? And based on that, you would then derive your business strategy. Now, further down, it's really about thinking about value. So what would be important and how can we make it happen in solution discovery? And then further down, delivery and validation. Now, if you look at that, you will see there's this disconnect in there. And actually, in our book, Don and I, we like to call it the project management vacuum. And maybe some of you remember from your physics class at school, a vacuum has this strong need to fill itself. And if we're not careful, it fills itself with those classical artifacts. Maybe we have a charter, milestones, or reports. And those reports are often on time, budget, and scope. Sorry. If you think about that, it's all about process compliance. Yes, we are really good. We are following the plan. We are still in the timeline about when things should be completed. I once read in a book, design is never late. Then I thought about it and just say, actually, yes, it is. I mean, it's never late. Because if you have 3 months to draw boxes and lines and connect them, well, that's what you do for 3 months. And after 3 months, you would just say, yep, here it is. That's our specification. And everybody says, yes, it's good. It's on time. Everything is looking good so far. But it's process compliance because we don't know if the specifications, if the design are right, because we haven't implemented yet. We haven't had the validation in the market. Because the only validation which really matters is the customer says, thank you, that's what I needed. This fixes my problem. And this is really where product ownership comes into the picture. And I like to draw the lines along those lines. And and I like to use the word ownership to really make clear that's the activity about what we do. So what would happen in there? You would think about, now as a product owner, you would need to really understand what is the intention, the high level goal, the vision of the organization. And once you have it understood, and understanding means you just don't read a document, just say, okay, that's what the company wants. You would have to have the chance to ask questions. Why do you want that? Why do you think this? Why that would do similar to this? Could we do it like, I don't know. Now, and going through this conversation, so this going forward and backward, you would understand the narrative. What's really about, what should be happening. And once you have that understood, you can basically solidify this understanding in a product vision. Now, this vision is, if you think about it, you have your company vision. That's a stake in the ground. And then you would basically put another one in the ground for your product, and that would be connected. And once you have that, you can come up with a product strategy. We should do this first, we should do that. If this proves to be right, maybe we should do this and this afterwards. But once you have the strategy, it's also about execution. No, getting out of this. This was also one of the topics we had in our kind of get to know each other breakout rooms. Getting out of this linear thinking by activities where we plan everything, we analyze everything, we design everything, we implement everything, we test everything, and then release everything. It's about how can we make this vertical slice? Take one small problem, work out a solution for that, and validate that it's the right one. Think in vertical slices. Sometimes we refer to it as the sashimi principle. Now, this would mean that you would then also go ahead and engage with the people doing the work in Scrum, the developers. And you would not just give them something, do this. You would tell them, hey, there are some problems you need to solve. Right now, this is the most important one, and I have some ideas, but let's talk about that. And through this conversation, the developers would understand why this problem is important, for whom it is important. Because the perspective for whom we solve a problem has an impact about how the what will look like. And this gives them the chance to understand what they should be doing. And then they can execute on that. And this is also the reason why the lines we have here, in contrast to the project mindset, to a product mindset, is further up and further down. So the bandwidth is wider. Okay? And in English, there's this word amalgamation, which basically means you bring two materials together without having an interface in between. It just flows from one to the other. So product ownership is the amalgamation from what the organization wants to achieve down to the people doing the work. And that's really how you represent the value stream. And by doing this, we would get rid of all this activity thinking, phases, milestone thinking, and start to think in value. And if you look into the Scrum Guide, what's the purpose of a product owner? To maximize the value of the work from the Scrum team. Okay. So this is really like the underlying thinking in Scrum. Now, there's the thing we call the EBM guide. You can also find it. Let me just go ahead here quickly and open it up. Here we go. So in the same way, there's an Scrum guide or a Nexus guide. There's also an EBM guide, and basically this is the graphic I copied onto the Mural. And essentially is that there is a strategic goal. So this is like what we have down here is what's commonly referred to as a kata, which is something Toyota has been doing for 50, 60 years now. That's what made them good, essentially. So what is our strategic goal? You can think about the strategic goal similar to what's the organizational vision, the company vision. Or what could be a next meaningful step in that direction? That would be the intermediate goal. Okay. And there was a starting state. This is where we were, and this is where we want to be. Maybe this shifts a little bit here and there, but overall it should be stable, because if your vision changes every other week, there wouldn't be a commitment happening. Because people would just say, yeah, well, let's do this for a couple of days. Let's just wait it out, because they're going to change their mind anyway. Kind of weird organizational behavior. And then you would basically aim towards the next smaller thing. And that's kind of what we have now with the product goal in Scrum. And then we kind of have this experiment loop. Again, this is where scientific thinking comes into the picture. So we come up with a hypothesis. We believe these features or this and this and this will be really important. And then we would implement that, experiment our way there, maybe to some degree, and measure. Bring in the evidence. That's why it's scientific, because we would have the evidence through our measurements that what we have done was either right or wrong. If it's right, awesome. If it's wrong, well, okay, at least we know we are wrong. And that's also really valuable, because then we would know whatever we have thought about, whatever we have done wasn't right. And then we can think about what other experiment we could do. So that would then basically be part of the inspection and then as well as the adaptation. And yeah, that sounds pretty much like Scrum on a higher level, I think. So now looking at the product management onion and this improvement cutter thinking we have here. And I also mentioned that in the breakout room we had before, if you are working in an organization who's thinking about Agile, but maybe doesn't have the guts to really do it, Kata could be a good approach for that because it's not invasive. You can just kind of try something here and there slowly and then ease into becoming more Agile over time. And let's see how this maps to more artifacts we have in our environment. And if we have this here, kind of, and I mentioned some of them again. So company vision, business strategy, that's very strategic. And now there's nothing wrong with that. Then we would have our intermediate goals here in between. And then our immediate actionable goals. Further down here. And now, if you think about this here, this would be our, not our product vision, this would be our, there's something missing. Looks like. Yeah, there should be, let me just do some magic here. That would be company vision. So that would be the company vision. Oh, we have this up here. Let me just check something. I did some changes on the mural today and probably tricked myself, it looks like.
Shouldn't be the vision statement on the top.
Exactly. Here you go. Yeah.
You have it vision. on the left hand side next to Nexus goal.
Yeah. Ah, here it is. Yes. Sorry. I don't know. Someone didn't see it. So up here, there would be the vision statement. Thank you for that. And based on that, we would derive our business plan. That could be a more classical business plan. That could be a more agile business plan. Things are changing here right now as well. And then we would have the product vision. And then the roadmap. And let me say a few words about the roadmap here right now. So I still have it in here because I still think a roadmap could be valuable. But since I thought about it the first time, I had the roadmap larger. Let me just, I had the roadmap. Let me zoom in a little bit. I had the roadmap about this size. But I really think about a roadmap is still a linear thinking because it tells quite some time ahead. This is what we will be doing. And by doing this, essentially, you lose your empirical thinking, your empirical behavior. So I think roadmaps could be conceptually helpful, but I think in the real life, if you have a good product goal and a good product vision and a product backlog, that's pretty much all the roadmap you need. Because if you add a roadmap on top of that, you might still think linear, be plan-driven. But again, I just leave it in here. I need to think more about that. So then we would have here the roadmap. And then the product goal. Then we would have our sprint goal. Now, if you work in a scaled environment, we would have then also our Nexus goal. If we would have like several teams working for one product owner, and then down here further down, so the daily goals. Spacing is not perfect, but you know what I mean. So this is going to see how this fits together. And usually what we see is that strategically, so many things are pretty simple. We just have people to behave this way, or they need to. Now, strategically, I think we all have found answers to so many problems we have on this earth. But how do you make people think that way? How do you make people maybe first understand your thinking so that they think that way, that they act that way? The challenge is in the tactics. The challenge is in translating the strategies into what are we going to do? And that's, again, this is where this vertical slicing comes into the picture, the work of a product owner. Now, Let me give you a few examples and zoom out here again. So basically the company vision, that's a goal. It's very strategic, and maybe there's a vision statement or something. This instance, I mean, what could be some real life objects or artifacts you would have seen for that. And based on that, you would then come up with your business strategy, where you would have then your business plan, maybe a business model canvas or lean canvas or something similar, which would basically fulfill that need. And I think the business plan is all for me to communicate the narrative. Now, why are we doing what we are doing? Now, the other thing which I think is interesting is that a vision is always in front of us. And what everything we have done is basically behind of us. And we always think like the strategy, the manifestation of the strategy is today. And it's always today. Because that's what we do to get there. That's what we do tactically right now to fulfill the strategy. So we shouldn't worry too much about what happened in the past. If something went wrong, it went wrong. You know? We should always keep the eye on the prize. That's for sure, on the vision we want to achieve. But don't worry too much about kind of all of the details. Let's just worry about what can we do today. And the same thing tomorrow, which would be today. And then the day after, which again would be today. So essentially, strategy drives you today. And how do you translate that, the future, the anticipated future, into your actions you do every day? That's the challenge. And that means mental alignment, mental understanding, right cognition for everybody who is part of this team. And this has a lot to do with communication. So good leadership is able to communicate well and takes the time to talk to people. And in the same regard, it's a good thing for a product owner to talk to people, to understand their needs, talk to developers, tell them what the people need and so on. Or maybe bring the developers and the people who have some problems actually together so that they can talk to each other and understand what's really going on. Now underneath, we would have the product vision. That's kind of the intersection from the strategic thinking into something more intermediate. Still further out, but much more tangible already. For that, we could use maybe something like the elevator pitch, a product box. What I really like from what Amazon is doing, working backwards. It's like, essentially, if you have a product, I'm not sure if you're familiar with working backwards, but essentially what they do at Amazon is that if you have a product idea, you write a newspaper article. Today, Amazon launched product X. X is doing this and this. X integrates here, helps you there, all of these things. So essentially, they say this is what will be the appreciation from the world once we launch the product, how they think about it. And then they have also a one page or 2 pages of FAQs, what could be possible frequently asked questions about this product and how would you answer that? And if you have good questions and good answers for that, you get some money. Not a lot, but some money and some time. And then you come back and you prove that what you're doing looks right. And I think this is really working backwards. You start off with the thing you want to achieve further out. And then what are the steps you can do to get there? Or for the X, the 4 disciplines of execution, they have something they call the WIC. And now the acronym is slipping my mind. Wild, I can't remember what the I stands for, a goal, something like a wild, crazy goal, something like that. But again, it's something like, okay, what's really out there? What could we put our teeth in and try to achieve? And then we think about the product strategy, and that's kind of the intermediate. It's kind of in here. And again, this would be a place where we could think about having maybe a roadmaps where we lay some steps out. But again, for me, roadmaps, the less emphasis you put on that, probably the more agile the organization is already. So this doesn't mean stop having a roadmap and you will be agile. It's more like a manifestation of being more agile, that the importance of a roadmap gets diminished. And then value and solution discovery, again, that's the intersection between intermediate goals to actionable goals, tactical work. And that's where our product goal comes into the picture. That's why I really appreciate the new version of the Scrum Guide where this product goal was in there, because in the past it was somehow in there we did it through maybe our roadmaps, maybe through our release plans and things like that. And then it really gets actionable, delivering validation. And this would then be, if you think in Scrum, our sprint goal. And now, if you look at all of these things here, they all have clearly something tangible in mind. Now, sometimes it's even called a goal, sometimes less so, but the intention, the meaning is pretty much the same. So it's the connection of the goals. And we don't go forward, we go backward. What do we want to achieve? And maybe even think about how would we know that we were successful with what we had planned to do. Well, think about some measurements there as well. Okay. Now, I would believe that probably most of you have heard about the concept of SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And I like SMART goals. But not every goal has to be SMART. Now, SMART goal makes sense on tactical work because it's very specific. Well, we need to be able to measure it. It's attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Sometimes it should take so long. About. Now, then there's also the concept of what's referred to as fast goals. And that was developed by, I think, Google and Adobe. Maybe Intel was there as well. Frequently discussed, ambitious, specific, and transparent. Okay. So if you look at that, you can just say, well, a vision statement, I think that's specific and that's measurable, hopefully. Now, a business plan, same, specific and measurable. Now, a product vision is hopefully attainable, because if we have a product vision which we know we cannot achieve, the question is, why do we do it? Now, a product goal is absolutely realistic because it's a step closer. It's much more tangible. So if a product goal is not realistic, it's like, why do we do it? And then the sprint goal, daily goals, that's really time bound, because, hey, within the sprint lengths, we have to achieve that. Or within our day, that's what we want to achieve to get everything back on track. So you can see the further down you go, the more move from strategic to tactical, the more smart your goals become. On the other hand, pretty much you can apply the fast on all of those, frequently discussed, because you should mention, why are we doing this again and again and again? That's actually one of my tests I like to do once I go into an organization. I grab a random person and just say, what's the vision you're working for? Well, I don't really know, but well, I work on these things here right now. Okay, and why? Well, they were assigned. I think everybody deserves to know why they're doing what they're doing and why this is important and why this would help someone. We often forget the who. This is where I really appreciate the approach of impact mapping, because in impact mapping, or let me explain slightly different, is that we have a tendency to start off with, that's what we need, and we come with a long list of requirements. Sometimes we even then apply the Moscow principle, must have, should have, could have, and so on. Now, there's this nice saying of Henry Ford. He said that if I would have asked people what they want, the answer would have been faster horses. But the solution to the problem was something totally different. So if we understand for whom we are going to solve a problem, we can really bring in empathy, talk to them, understand them. And once we have really understood the underlying problem, we can come up with a solution which might be totally different than what we originally thought about, but it will nail the problem much, much better. And this is what makes good products, essentially. Now, if you think that going down to the sprint goal, daily goal, ambitious, I think a sprint goal is still ambitious, but it's really, hey, that's what we do next sprint. We actually, because we commit to that, we believe we can do it. So there's still a little bit stretch in there, but it shouldn't be too stretchy in that regard. So maybe it's ambitious, maybe it's not. Be your own judge in this regard here. So, but for me, the thing is really that the concept of fast goals is really something which is much more applicable kind of in the Agile environment. Whereas if you think about the sprint backlog, sprint goal, that's still very smart. Smart would apply. Now let's look here at the product goal and let's go back to this product management onion. So the product goal is the connection between the product vision and the product strategy. We talked about this. And then basically once you have your product goal, you build a product backlog for that current product goal. In the Scrum Guide, there's the sentence, the product goal is in the product backlog. And that essentially means is the only reason for the current product backlog to exist is for the current product goal, nothing else. Now, how far out should our product goal be? There's nothing written in the Scrum Guide about that, so you have to be your own judge. For me, it's around 6 months, give and take. So 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, but around this time frame. So it tends to be longer than a couple of sprints basically would be in there. Depending on how vague your environment is, how much VUCA it is, you might want to have smaller product goals, maybe go more towards 4 months. This is me talking. This is my experience. This is what I work with. But this analogy means is that your product backlog couldn't be that large by definition. So for me, every product backlog which is larger than, let's say you have a product goal which is 6 months out and you work with sprints of 2 weeks, there would be 12 sprints. Let's say you complete, let's say 8 items in a sprint, that would be around 100. So every product backlog, which has more than 100 items in it. Think about it. Now, again, the Scrum Guide is quiet. It doesn't tell you what is a good number of product backlog items in the product backlog. But if you apply that thinking, do we have really an ordered backlog, which is transparent, understandable? Or do we have a dumping ground where stuff gets just thrown in and thrown in and thrown in, and we just take things in there because it makes people happy? It's in the product backlog. But some things go into the product backlog and they die there. So again, it's a good product, and I think you would kind of keep clean house in regards with your product backlog. And then basically this product backlog would be refined. And then based on that product backlog, we have a refined product backlog. We would go into the sprint planning. And with that, we would come into the sprint goal. And the sprint goal is, let me just move everything a little bit to the left, so it kind of fits better with the onion here we have here. So essentially the sprint goal is then the connection into delivery and validation, because the sprint is tactical. Sprint planning, sprint goal, here we go. So here we would have that. Then in the sprint, we would have the daily scrum, and then at the very end of the sprint review, at the end of the sprint review, the validation essentially. So the daily scrum is all about delivery, and then review is a big chunk of validation here as well. Now, essentially what this means is that you're, just bring up my tablet. So your product goal essentially stretches from here to here. That's kind of your product goal. It's not going into delivery and validation anymore. Now your product backlog essentially stretches from here to here. So it goes actually also into the sprint. And the further down you get, the more specific, concrete it becomes. So up here, now think about this is like a flipped product backlog. So up here, things are really vague, but the further down you go, the more concrete they become. the more black and white. And that's what the refinement is all about. Having this conversation with stakeholders, with the people about acceptance criteria, corner cases, and so on, all of these things. And then basically we take elements out of that product backlog, bring it into a sprint, we have the developers develop it and make sure it fits well together. So another way you can think about that is here with the, what I like to call it, project goal triangle. And essentially the way you can think about that is it's like a force field. Let's say you go to a restaurant and you would be asked about how was the taste, how was the service, and how was the price. So if all were equally good, you would have to put the dot in the center. Let's say the taste was awesome. The price, it was really expensive. So, and the service was okay. And it would be somewhere kind of in this area here, away from. So essentially you have to think about the trade-offs. And that's basically also a good way for me to ask people for feedback, because then you can actually make a scatter plot about something like that and see kind of how things are shifting because of your changes, if you think about that. But anyway, now in that force field, your vision would be kind of on the far end between strategy and risk, because the vision is highly strategic, but also often highly impacted by risk exposures you have. Now your sprint goal is much more tactical. Still some strategy in there, still some risks, but it's manageable. If you think about it, you can consider a sprint to be like a mini project. A project has a beginning and an end, has a scope and a price. And we know what a sprint is costing. We have a sprint goal. That's the scope. And we have the length of the sprint. But again, there was this long stretch and there was always this disconnect somewhere in here. And this is where the product goal really comes in to fit in there. And again, depending on what you do, you might want to have it more tactical as a product goal or more strategic. But I would really make this dependent on the complexity, the amount of unknowns we anticipate to have in our initiative. And what I've done is I created a product goal canvas. Let me just open up this guy. And I hope it would be possible for you to get access to this mural, maybe as an email afterwards. Bartosz, I'll leave this to you, but otherwise just shoot me an email and I can pass it to you as well. But essentially, things we have talked about, vision, what do we want to achieve? Put it in here, a couple of sentences, maybe one sentence. Then the product goal. And on this product goal canvas, I really like to keep the product goal to one sentence only. Let's say by May or June, we want to have this and this and this. And the description really becomes important, because the description is the narrative. So think about, you put somebody in front of the product goal canvas, they read the vision, they, oh wow, that's really good, that's really ambitious, that's nice. Okay, they want to achieve this by May, okay, cool. And this is why they want that. Now, maybe we have observed, and this is often where we see sentences like that, we have observed that people do not purchase or finish the transaction and purchase our items at the last step because they are reluctant to provide these kinds of information or something else. And therefore, we believe that if we change it to this and this and this, it should improve. Now you understand the vision, you have a goal, which kind of provides the anchor point, and then you have the narrative, why we believe this is important. And then also think about the measurement. Again, here in the description of the product goal, you wouldn't really put in percentages or kind of clear numbers. That would be here in the outcomes. We want to increase our transaction rate by 10%. And then you can think about, and this goes back to the 4 disciplines of execution, is about, because we better differentiate between leading and lagging measures. So what's the difference between leading and lagging? So leading is something you can measure beforehand to something you can only measure maybe once in a while. Lagging. Let's say you want to lose weight. Leading and lagging is pretty much together. You can stand on a scale every day. You can stand on a scale every hour. You can even eat on a scale if you want to. But let's say your doctor tells you, you have to bring down your cholesterol. In 6 months, we run the next blood test. What can you measure 5 months, 29 days? Maybe do some research. Just the exercise is important. What I eat, what I drink, some other things maybe as well. And that's something you can measure every day. Okay, I didn't eat this, I eat that. I did so many steps, I did this and did that. Good, 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 good. And these would be leading measures. And if these leading measures, the assumption about these leading measures is right, and you run your blood test 6 months from now, lagging should be the evidence, yeah, it worked. If it worked, great, you know what you have been doing was right, so keep on doing it. If not, at least you would know, oh shoot, I wasted half a year doing the wrong things. I need to maybe amp it up or think about something else. And there's also 2 columns. What's related to the market, to the end user perspective, and what's internal capabilities. Because often to reach something on the market, we have to improve our internal capabilities about doing that. That could be internal infrastructure, internal technology. Yeah. So think along those lines here. Stakeholders. Who are the people kind of who are interested, have a stake in the product? Who are your users? I think that's important as well. Who would be influencers? That could be important customers, important people in your organization, providers, which organizations, people, or other things are you depending on, and governance. And it's broken down in internal governance, kind of which numbers do you have to deliver, let's say on a monthly basis, or maybe external. Maybe you have to follow some regulations. Maybe you work for a bank, maybe you work for a health company. What are the things which are important? And then who are those people? Because again, with the product you have to build. Or as a product owner, one of your most important activities is stakeholder management. Yeah? Try to make them happy, keep them happy. But on the other hand, you might engage slightly different with different types of stakeholders. What are the risks we are aware about? What could go wrong? Maybe one of the sprint goals or even product goals could be about risk mitigation. Now, the next thing we do is we want to tackle that risk. And then Scrum team, dedicated people for doing the work. Because one of the values in Scrum is focus. If you have people shuffling around all the time, you won't get to focus. You will not get to commitment either. So that's when basically things start to fall apart really, really quickly. So that's the product goal canvas. Now, what I often see is the following. What we have here, so on the left-hand side. And essentially what that means is up here we would have a business person. And this person would throw something over the wall down to the product owner we have down here. But then this question, what I was saying, okay, let me zoom in a little bit. Why do I have to do that? Okay, I think they mean that. I'm sure to many of you it has happened already that you did something and then you're being told that's wrong and just say, but this is what's written here. This is how I understood it. No, it was meant like that. Our language is not context-free. And I just wrote a blog, not just maybe 2 months ago, about essentially Agile done well, in my opinion, replaces classical requirement engineering. Because requirement engineering usually is a phase, is a step in your linear thinking. But we think in verticals, we think in value. So everything happens basically compressed in one sprint. We take something in, we implement it, we validate it, we test it, and then we possibly even ship it. But then things down here go wrong. Maybe our infrastructure isn't so great as we thought. Maybe our internal processes are not helping. They're more hindering. But all of those problems we have down here, they would never really be understood up here. Why? Because in between here we have the vacuum. This disconnect here again. Now, really good product ownership is essentially the thin slice through all of those layers. Now, basically, it means as a product owner, yeah, you are up here, and you're responsible for the connection of the product vision to the product strategy, value solution discovery, and delivery and validation. That's lots of work. And it will work if you probably are product owner for one Scrum team. But now what happens if you work in a scaled environment where you are product owner for several teams? That's too much work. You couldn't possibly write all the product backlog items anymore. And writing product backlog items is tactical work. But you as a product owner, you're in charge of the strategy. You're in charge of the product vision. You're in charge of communicating that, making the other people understand why this is important. Now, the good news is because it's too much tactical work, you couldn't do all of that anymore. Hey, no worries, because you have, right now I have an app which is not really behaving. Here we go. You have a Scrum team which can help you. So essentially, you provide the insight, you provide the narrative, the mental alignment to the developers. You give them the chance to ask their questions. Maybe some of you are working with stories or user stories. Now, the definition of a user story is it's a promise for a conversation to take place. It's all about conversation, and that's really what's important here. And once they have understood it, and this goes back to the product management onion we had before, they can act on that. They can come up with solutions, how they can implement that, and make sure all of these things happen. And again, if you would look at these things we have here, so here we would then have the intermediate goal. Then he would have here the product goal, kind of the connection we have here, and then basically the sprint goal would be kind of delivery and validation into that area as well. So that's kind of the connection here as well. And this maps again back to kind of what you're in charge for as a product owner. So again, you can see how good product ownership is really tied to leveraging good goals. And going back to OKRs, this is kind of basically how you can think about OKRs, because objective and key results. And often there's this good book from John Dare, Measure What Matters. And essentially key results, think about it more like not results, think about more activities. So your objective might have several key results, but each one of those key results could become an objective for the layer underneath. Well, we need this and this. Okay, we can take care of that. And then this is how you can basically, again, tie those goals together, or maybe these objectives, if you want to use this term in the regards to OKRs. And that's really how you can really kind of facilitate value-driven, outcome-driven reporting structures within your organization. Having a clear goal is really important. And I like to think about this here along with the 8 Steps of Change from John Kotter. Maybe you've heard about or read his book. No, the book title. There's a penguin on the cover. It's a brilliant book about penguins and an iceberg and stuff like that. Leading Change. That's the title of the book. And his first step...
Wasn't iceberg is melting? With the penguins?
Yes.
Our iceberg is melting. I guess.
Leading Change also has a penguin on it. Maybe I'm confusing here. Leading Change. Yeah, okay. I remember that this was the book with the iceberg, but maybe I'm wrong. Could be. Anyway,
I think the Polish title is about penguins and English is different.
Okay, maybe that's the explanation. Okay, here we go. Interesting. Yeah. Actually, in the translation of my book into German, which was from a different printing house, they changed the tagline to something different, which is wrong. It's like weird. Anyway, so create a sense of urgency. So essentially, if you think about it, urgency in itself is also important. You can think about if you have a really important goal, which is kind of something we should be doing rather soon than later, because otherwise it could be too late, that's a really good motivator. And I think good leadership is able to communicate that and provide that sense of urgency for a goal. And the urgency really also again ties back to the fast goal, because hopefully it's ambitious. Oh yeah, if you achieve that, that would be brilliant. We would really be faster than them, and maybe we could this and that, and that's a highly motivating factor. So it's really about creating the sense of urgency, and then once you have that, you have to have the guiding coalition within your organization. This is really, if you think about it, more like a top-down change initiative at an organization. I don't like to talk about agile transformation because a transformation insinuates there's an end state. There's never an end state. Once you're agile, you're always agile. Once you live healthy, you always live healthy. There's no end to it. It's just the way you think, the way you act. But again, if you work with that, you have this goal, which is urgent. You put a team into charge, which basically helps to remove those organizational impediments to make this transformation. Now I was using the word transformation, this change forward. And then basically we start off with a vision again. That's a goal. And then basically this is then how you work through that. And at the very end, you have to institute it, basically make it part of the organizational culture. Because, let me just have a sip of water. Because for me, agile is a mindset. And once you have a specific mindset, you probably change it over a long time, but it will take a long time. But normally, if it's a good mindset, you will stick with it because it rewards you. It gives you what you need. And what's the mindset of an organization? What's the organizational culture? So essentially, every time you want to make an organization agile, you basically need to work with the organizational culture, which is underlying there. But again, urgency, goal, you're tied together again as well. Now, just to wrap everything up here quickly again. So the company vision essentially informs everything underneath all the way down to the product vision. And the product vision informs everything further down to the value and solution discovery, the what. And along here, we would have the refinement where we maybe think about impact mapping. For whom are we going to do that? And then basically we would do this, and whatever we learn here, enact some changes here, which then basically, if there's some major changes, would also enact some changes and validation further up. And this is how we establish those feedback loops, those communication channels. Okay. So here we are. Luckily, we have lots of time. So if there are no questions, if there are questions, I would have time for questions. That's what I wanted to say.
So far, there was one question on the chat, and it was, does strategic goal changes? It was from Asif.
Okay. Now we want to be agile, we want to inspect and adapt. So if the strategic goal shifts, and if we go back to this graphic we have here, you see it like slightly. So yes, it can move, but it shouldn't really change dramatically. So now, when is it too much? Well, I think you need to be the judge of that. But essentially, it's okay, but it shouldn't really. You could probably inspect and adapt it, but you wouldn't really kind of transform it into something totally different.
I see that Maria
Anything else?
is raising her hand. So Maria, fire away.
Yeah, I have a question connected with this one. If we are speaking about changing the strategic goal, for what amount of time do we set this strategic goal? Is it for like 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, or what do you think? Or does it depend?
So this graphic is derived from the Kata approach of organizational change, and they talk about 6-9 months. Now, Sweden had the vision over 40 years ago. That was in 1980. By 2020, we will have no death in traffic anymore. So essentially, nobody dies with their private vehicle or on a train accident or something like that. And they have been working, that's the Wikipedia page actually about that. So the curve has been going down, but it's not at zero. So in 2020, they added another 20 years or something on top of that. So I think it's a really valuable, honorable vision. Maybe they get there at some point. So I think a very good vision, it depends on what you want to do. Like then there's the other vision statement we have about the Apollo space program from JFK. Within the decade, we will bring man to the moon and return them home safely. Also a very good vision statement. It's very ambitious. It's time bound within the decade, 10 years. And it also has acceptance criteria, return them home safely. Those guys come back alive. So I think what I'm trying to tell you here is, well, you know, I'll let you be the judge in that regard. But I think probably in most of the cases, if you think more organizational kind of things we do here, it probably should be around maybe 1 to 2 years, not much longer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we have another question from Piotr. Oh, that's the longer one.
Let me just look at this one here. About tying word strategic to goal, it implies that there must exist the goal above. Just a goal as a strategy is a rough plan. And the theory about achieving that goal, as far as I understood so far, we have an. So essentially, the question is here: what's above this strategic goal? I think this is kind of my understanding here, and it basically goes back to the question: who guards the guardians? Kind of somehow there has to be something around that, and that's often not a question about Scrum or who tells the product owner essentially what to do. And I think this is again very organizational depending. I mean, essentially the strategic goal is, and if we go back over here, if your organization has a vision statement, well, then that should be, this would be then probably be further out there. Maybe that's your strategic goal in here, and then you basically try to achieve that by building a specific product, which will be a combination, a sequence of product goals. And for every product goal, you would have a sequence of sprint goals getting you to the product goal. So it's like a chain of pearl. You kind of thread them on. Now, if you wouldn't have a company vision, well, then the question is, why do you do what you do? Where this is coming from? Maybe there's departmental goals. Maybe in this regard, it would be less strategic at this point already. Maybe it shouldn't be so far out anymore. Maybe it should be, then everything would become a little bit more compressed in that regard. I think kind of if you look at that in your own environment is, think about what is the value you're providing for whom with what you do right now in regards of your product. And let me just quickly interject here. This is one of the most important first step, I think, for every organization who wants to move more towards Scrum, is to get out of a project mindset into a product mindset. Because a project mindset is by definition activity driven, phases driven. A product mindset is value driven, and that's basically what helps you to get into this vertical slicing and that thinking. And once you have that thinking in value, you can really see like what is the piece I'm working on and where I'm embedded in for what I'm doing. That okay, that's like those Russian dolls, kind of what is the dollar around me? Okay, I need to talk to those people. I need to understand why this is important. And this really depends on your context. But the underlying principles, the underlying ideas, always the same.
Piotr, are you satisfied with the answer?
Actually, I have something other in mind. So maybe
Okay.
I will try to clarify. Yeah. As far as I can tell from my experience, we overuse the word of strategy or strategic. And when I see like strategic goal, it implies that there is some strategy in place. And if there is some strategy in place, there must exist a goal that was the initial point for forming a strategy. So the military examples are the best one. Like the obvious goal for in each conflict is to win with the opponent. Like it's the goal there. And then you have like a strategy how to achieve that goal. And within that strategy, you can, of course, have some strategic goals like take this city or take this harbor because it's important for you to advance towards the ultimate goal of winning with your opponent. So
Okay.
that's a simple example. So that was my...
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we are on the same page. And if we go over here, it's because the strategic goal is more like a concept under which we have the vision statement, business plan, and product vision. We want to win the war. Well, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that. Okay, for us, this means this and this and this instead of product visions. Now we have to maybe to conquer that city. We have to make sure this river is in our control or something along those lines. Does this resonate with you?
A little bit, like it bothers me that the purple boxes overlap with like company vision, business strategy, like and strategic goal. I'm a little bit purist in regards to terms, to using the words, and it bothers me that it overlaps because for me, like for example, business strategy will be something bigger and strategic goal or strategic goals will live within it, for example.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's just to think this is the labeling I picked up from the literature I was going through.
Yeah, I know. I totally understood.
I think that I understand where you goes, Piotr. And I'm just checking what is the explanation of the word strategic in the Cambridge dictionary. So it says it's helping to achieve a plan, for example, in business or politics, right? And that overarching goal that you're discussing, wouldn't that be just a vision? So that's the overarching goal. And then the strategic goal is something on the path towards it that would help us achieve it?
Yes, exactly. Like strategic goal would be something like we have strategic goal, intermediate goal. So actually you have some goal in the beginning, like win election, for example. You also mentioned the description dictionary, but this is like the goal that you strive to achieve. And strategic goal or goals will be like intermediate goals on that path, because you know they advance you so much towards your end goal. Therefore, there are strategic goals, like you want to achieve them along the way, because that's how you see ultimately your success. So when I take a snapshot look on what we are seeing right now on the screen, I have a link. What is the goal above? Like who is in charge? Like where is the
in an organization that would be the board. This could be the CEO. Someone further up there, up the food chain.
Maybe can I
yeah,
say
sure,
something?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Please do.
Maybe the intuition is bad, because first intuition with the word goal is something to finish, something which can be finished, and something strategic goal is next to vision statement or business plan. It's not intuition, because if the company have a mission, I want to build good cars, good quality cars, and there is strategic goal next to it, it's some dissonance, because you see something which can be done and something I have still doing. Thus I feel like the weird feeling when I see strategic goal next to vision statement. Something can be finished and something is continuous.
And let me and then we move on to the next question, but let me just add something on top of that. I think going back to the example about maybe the strategic goal is we want to have the highest quality cars on the market. Sounds great, but how do we get there? So essentially you have to take it out of the strategic area and make it more tangible. And that's basically where you would come up with intermediate goals. And then you could think about maybe for a car and with a car specialist, it's like we have to make the tolerances, bring it down from 10 micrometers to 5 micrometers so that there's less wear and tear and stuff lasts longer. We have to make sure all our paint jobs, something like that, are much 10% harder than they used to be, so they wouldn't kind of peel off so quickly. And they would be much more intermediate, but then how do we make those happen? And that would be then the actions which would happen further down. Other questions?
I have a practical question.
Yes.
What is the guide for you to create a good goals? Because I'm joining to a new, let's say I'm joining to a new company. I see strategic goals, and what is the guidelines for me to know that these goals, these visions are good?
Okay, so what makes a goal a good goal? And this goes back for me, kind of let's go back to this fast goal. I think it should be something which is openly shared. Everybody should know why we do that. It should be kind of company-wide, understood. Again, going back to the NASA space program, Apollo space program, there's this story. I'm not sure if this is true, but basically somebody walked into a hall where they were kind of building some rocket launch stages. And there was this janitor sweeping the floor, and somebody was asking, "So what are you doing here?" "Well, I'm helping to bring a man on the moon." Now he understood the vision of it. He could just say, "Well, I'm here to make sure there's no dirt on the floor, nobody gets slips and gets injured," along those lines. So kind of really open in public, understood by everyone. And I think a good goal is ambitious. It's like, it's not easy, but it still feels realistic. It's like, yeah, if we stretch, we can get there. And that's a good motivator. But on the other hand, it has to be specific enough that we know what it means. And transparent, again, frequently discussed. So basically people can challenge it. And I think if you can't defend your vision, that's not a good vision. And transparent is kind of shared with everyone. So I kind of mix things a little bit here. So I think the vision statement from Uber, maybe you know the car service, is, I'm not sure if they changed it, but this is what I remember, is we want to make transport as easily available as tap water. And it's like, wow, that's a weird vision statement. But, every time you enter a house and you see a tap, well, I can open it up and I get water. And I would say pretty much in all of Europe, you can know, well, I can even drink it. It's safe. And this was the same idea about transport. I take out my phone and say, guys, dang, I need a ride over there. It takes care of everything because the phone knows where I am. The driver knows then basically where to find me, and then they know the location because I told them through the app. Really simple, powerful vision statement. Now the question is, what do we have to make this happen? And then you have to think about those next intermediate goals. Discover the location, map the location with a street map. Next goal could be, we have to find the optimal route. Maybe driven by what's the fastest time, or maybe some other things, which loses the least amount of gasoline, and so on. So I think kind of really for me, if you go back and somebody ask them, so why are we doing what we're doing? What's the vision behind that? And they give you something. Compare them to fast. And maybe then ask those questions. Okay?
Yeah, makes sense. Because the funny thing is, we know about the SMART goals, the fast goals, but this, when you read something you create with the team and the business, it doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
And that's why I ask about it, because it's not so obvious. It's not so easy to create this and make people understand it and create a mindset that they want to go with you there.
Exactly. And this is for me where I think you should have the right to ask why. Why is this important? Why do we need to have this? Or maybe it goes down to a specific feature or some other things. Why? And it should always be easily explainable and defendable and make sense in the context of that. And this context should make sense in the bigger context. And I think once we have that and everybody has that understanding in their heads, and this is what I basically refer to as the cognitive alignment, because then we are all aligned mentally and think in the same direction. And if we all think in the same direction, we can walk into the same direction together. Instead of I run here, you run there, somebody else runs there, and it's just, oh, sorry, I misunderstood. I didn't, okay, my apologies. And that happens all the time. And why does this happen? Because we do not communicate right. We do not communicate enough. We are much more driven by, now what is requirements engineering or all this documentation about? It's about codifying knowledge. Persist information so that we can read it half a year from now and still extract the same amount of detail and information. And it's not possible. If we're good in writing, we bring 30% of our knowledge on paper. If we're a good reader, we get 80% back. It's a lossy process. And instead of trying to do that, we come up with the verticals, small ideas. That's our product goal. And for this is our first sprint goal. If we achieve that, awesome. That would be great. Okay, bang, let's do it for that. Okay, it works great. Next step. Or maybe, oh no, it didn't work. Let's do it this way now. So everything happens, but it's important within one sprint. And if you do that, you do Scrum. And that would mean you have to have meaningful sprint goals. Not just we do ticket 1, 5, and 33 out of Jira. That's output, that's progress, not a goal. Okay.
So asking why 5 whys?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm the lean guy, so.
Actually,
perfect.
Asking why is the very first step. I think that what I take from the answer of the conversation, I was lost for a while, but in the end, you bring me back. But hearing compelling story in the answers is the answer to your question, I believe. Like, how can you find if the goal that you are presented is a good goal or strategic goal, whatever? If someone who were there when this goal was crafted can share with you compelling story, why it's important right now, why I pursued this goal, and you can reflect on that story and agree, okay, and understood it's compelling, for it's cohesive, it's thick, then it's probably a good goal. But if you think it like it's just a BS, like you don't buy it, then probably it's a not good goal. Whatever this goal is, strategic, sprint goal, intermediate, doesn't matter. If the story doesn't stick to your answers, then it's not a good goal.
Yeah. And this is where the narrative becomes really important for me. Like, and I believe as a product owner, you should be a good storyteller. You tell the story about the product. You tell how this product will help people to solve specific problems they are facing right now, and how this would make their life. Because essentially, every product solves a problem. And you buy products as a user, as a consumer. You don't buy a project. You buy something which solves your problem. Now, here, water, hydration solves a problem. The glass solves a problem. The water just doesn't flow around. It stays at one place. Now, all of that solves a problem. It's really this problem orientation. And I think as a good product owner, if you think about the product vision, because the product vision is the overarching idea about solving a bigger problem for specific customers, you should really be in love with the problem, less with the solution. Because if you're in love with the problem, you come up with really good solutions.
Any other questions or thoughts to be shared?
I think creating goals is a competence in a team, in an organization, and when we creating new goals, they will be better than the past ones for sure. We need to learn them not only in an organization, but in a team, in a product. Because on many levels we will be wrong. It will be wrong defined goals. It will be wrong placed goals. We will be lacking of right measures there. Just like in OKRs. OKRs don't need to be perfect to start OKR period. We need to be good enough to start, and we learn in the process. In the end, we are learning here.
That's why we have this experiment loop here, which makes it a scientific approach.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good point, Łukasz. Those won't be perfect from the very beginning. We just need to exercise those like our muscles.
Yeah, I've been to organizations, they made a plan, like really is waterfall to become agile. In 3 months we will be here and so on. It's like, no, you cannot waterfall into agile. You have to do the leap. You have to jump out of the plane and trust that the parachute opens. And at some point you have to do the commitment and go for that. And that's basically, you start off with your first goal, and maybe it's good, awesome, good luck for you. Maybe it isn't, but then you would, because you have the feedback loops. Let me just scroll over here. You have those connections here. You would really quickly discover that something is off. And then you can counteract. Transparency, inspection, adaptation.
I see that someone is asking for the recommendations for becoming a better product owner. Of course, it will be the book by Ralph Jocham.
So I don't want to sell my book, but good books out there is Working Backwards. Measure What Matters, Inspired.
I really like books by Roman Pichler. So, for example, Strategize. Those are also really valuable.
So these are pretty much the books. Are kind of. I'm. The last half year, I've been not reading too much about this topic. Actually, I've been really going into more like the brain science, because in the end of the day, that's my current belief: is if we don't make people willing to change in their heads, everything we do is futile. Now, how can you, and this has a lot to do with our brain chemistry, with the amygdala and so on. I don't want to go into details here right now, but this is really such an interesting topic. Is like, if you approach a person wrong, they go into flight or fight mode, and whatever you say afterwards, it won't work. And that's really about kind of also an interesting topic. But I think this is also, an important skill as a good product owner. How can you engage with your stakeholders in a way that you can collaboratively work with them, find answers to tough solutions, tough problems, good solutions to tough problems. And if you approach them wrong, they will lock down. You will fail.
By the way, I had a thought when you were saying about the roadmap that actually, well, being agile, you don't necessarily need to have a roadmap. Isn't a roadmap for the agilists like a set of the product goals? So it's more like a goal-oriented roadmap.
Exactly. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Normally, you don't really have too many product goals laid out because then you would think to linear again. You would be back to your roadmap. So usually it's like we have a vision, let's say 2 years from now, our next product goal is, let's say, end of the year 2024. By June, we want to have that.
But it doesn't
and
mean
maybe
that you
have
need to
some
stick
vague
to those,
ideas
right?
about the next product goal. Yeah, but this is really about how we would be really kind of guided by experimentation and learning, be empirical.
Yeah. Just wanted to say there is nothing wrong in thinking in advance, but it doesn't mean that you need to stick to those product goals. Those may change.
Yeah, planning is essential. Plans are useless. The activity of planning, that's where the value is in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because once things go wrong or once things change, you thought about it probably ahead, and then just, this happened, let's forget about this, let's do this, because you have already a good understanding about what's going on.
Any other questions or thoughts? I see some other recommendations of the books in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here right now as well. Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't want to hijack the meetup, but
yes,
for me it's interesting question, Ralph, to you. After writing your book, like it's a journey in itself to write a book. So I'm interested on your like 1-2 key learnings that you get thanks to the journey that you took to write your own book on the topic. So you started with maybe some state of mind and you finished with another. You maybe find some interesting ideas along the way.
It's harder than you think it is. It's very rewarding. It takes some persistence along the way, because sometimes there are moments when, and I think this is, I really now, because we wrote it together. So, and sometimes when you were kind of like really busy, I run my own company. So essentially doing this on the side, this basically means evenings and weekends. Same thing for Don. And so it was really good to lean on someone else. Someone get a nudge. Hey, come on, guys, let's meet next Saturday and let's finish up that chapter and so on. So, but it really makes you go a level deeper than you normally do. I would think often you read something and you talk about it, and if somebody says you talk your way out of that. But once you have it written down and it's on paper, it's written there. So you have to really make sure the references are right, your resources are right. It's not fake, it's not made up. So it really kind of puts another layer underneath your knowledge, another foundation puts underneath. I think this was really valuable for me in that regard. But now on the other hand, once you have gone through that, you know how this works. It's like writing the next book is like, yeah, I know what I'm going to expect. I know what will be tough. I know how I can handle that. So it would be a different journey in that regard.
Does it mean you're going to write another one?
I don't want to promise anything right now here, but I have a really good colleague and we have a really good idea, and the future will tell.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything that comes to your mind that you would like to discuss, taking the opportunity that Ralph is with us? We've already exceeded the time by 5 minutes. So if there are no other questions, the proposal is if any one of you would like to stay, just have a chit chat, we may even create several breakout rooms. So you may choose on your own. If you see a colleague that you haven't seen for a while and you would like to have a conversation, those breakout rooms will be still available, let's say till full hour. I would like to thank all of you for your participation. I have a special thank to Agata, our colleague from the community, who actually linked us with Ralph. So many thanks to you, Agata. And thank you also, Ralph, for taking our invitation and joining us and having the conversation with us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So the applause for Ralph. Thanks. Please remember, everyone, to share the feedback with us. I've just sent the link to menti.com. And Ralph, you said you will send us the link to your board, right?
Yes, I will make a PDF export of it and send it to you.
Sure. So we'll share the link via the meetup with the participants, and hopefully in some future you will also be able to watch the recording once again. Thanks everyone for your participation. Thanks, Ralph.
Take care. Stay safe.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thanks, bye.